We're here to learn about Inkscape. Inkscape is an open source vector editing program. If you are on the Backbone team, we use this program to work with lots of our graphics files that we use for large-scale printing, particularly files that are called vector files. I'll explain what that means in just a minute, but we're going to be looking at this program that we use to edit these files so that you can use them for posters, for t-shirts, printing for large items or anything like that in public. So let's start with talking about images and what images are. You'll see that certain files have certain extensions, and each of those extensions have different purposes. So just to give you an example of some of these extensions, we looked at this at a previous session where we have vector file types. You can see vector file types have all sorts of different types. And then raster file types, which have all different types. And you also know that we have things like TXT files and doc files. Those handle for text and rich formatting on those texts. There's HTML files, that's for web pages. And so we have a certain type of format that is for images. So when we have an image, there are two different types of images that we typically work with. So I mentioned raster file types. And the way raster file types work is you have an image set up like a grid, and in the grid, each square has its color identified as a specific piece of data in that file. So it would be 0, 1, 4, 25, I don't know, 3, 6, 100. There's just a bunch of numbers there, and those numbers represent the different types of intensities of different parts of the color spectrum. And so there's usually 3, 4, sometimes 5 numbers, and what those numbers will represent are the color, the components of each of the colors in that particular pixel. So if this were representing colors with RGB, which, does anyone know what RGB stands for? Anyone?
Red, green, blue.
Right. So RGB is red, green, blue. And so when you have RGB, you can represent any color with just 3 numbers. And the size of the number indicates what the intensity of that color is. So if every color is the maximum intensity, what color would that be? Anyone? Anyone?
White.
Well,
White, that's right. And if all of these colors...
on screen.
That's on screen, sure. If all of these colors were half the intensity, what color would it be?
Gray.
Right? And if they were all off, what color would it be?
Black.
Very good. And when you're producing light, RGB is the easiest way to represent that light. But if you're printing something on paper, there is no light being produced from the paper, right? The paper is literally just a reflection of the available light in the room. And so because of that, you would use different types of colors to represent those. And so one way of doing that is called CMYK. Does anyone want to take a guess at what those colors stand for?
Cyan, magenta, yellow, and I don't know what K is.
Does anyone know what K is? So Ryan said cyan, magenta, yellow, and K means?
Black, sorry.
Black, very good.
Printer colors.
That's exactly right. So when you have printing, these colors also can be combined to create every single color that exists in the world, effectively. Every single color that we can see, at least. And so sometimes the picture will be representative of this, right? And there's even additional ways of doing this. It's not really that important for what we're talking about, but what you should know is that there's a grid. These things have data points that describe the color, and the entire picture has a pixel for each of the individual boxes that represent the color. And so we can see that in pictures on the internet. And so if we were to take this picture of a rose, let's see if this works for us. No. Let's see. Copy. Here we go. Open image in new tab. Does Does that work? There we go. And if we zoom in really, really closely on there, you can actually see the individual boxes that make up this particular picture. Particularly when you get really, really zoomed in. Like this is showing up as blurry, but in actuality, the web browser is blurring this to make it more pleasing for you to look at. But this little box here is one color. I don't know if you can tell that or not, but that is just one color of this entire picture. And you can almost see the edges of the boxes. Like there is a pixel or a couple of pixels in that little area right here. And so when pictures look very pixelated to you, when you print them out, I don't know if you guys have ever taken a picture with your phone and then tried to print it somewhere on maybe on your home printer, and the picture comes out looking like that. The reason for that is because your paper, oh, here's my pen. Your paper is much bigger than the image that you're trying to print. And when it tries to stretch that image out onto the paper, it zooms it in and it makes it look like this. The only way that you can fix this is by saving more pixels, right? People typically will talk about the resolution of your TV, like 4K, 8K is the new hotness. That resolution is literally this, the number of pixels that are in the picture. And so when you're looking at your hokey 720p monitor, that 720p monitor really means that it is 720 pixels from top to bottom, and I think it's 1080 left to right. That's the size of 720p. 4K is literally 4,126 pixels or something like that, up and down, and then 6,000 something across. I don't remember what the actual numbers are, but that's how many pixels are in the image. And so the only way to make that picture look crisp is to provide all of the pixels. And some TVs, they'll cheat. They'll let you send in a lesser resolution picture, and they'll use AI to upscale it to 4K. So when you see a TV saying that it's upscaling it, really what it's doing is it's taking one little pixel here, and it's turning it into 4 pixels, or 8 pixels, or whatever, to make it look like there's more color there than there actually is. And sometimes that does a good job, but you can generally tell when it doesn't do a good job too. So how do you get around this problem? Obviously you can't have a picture that has infinite pixels, right? At a certain point, the file has to have a specific amount of information in it, and it can't produce information out of thin air. Well, the way that you solve this problem is with mathematics, all right? Instead of storing each and every single pixel in the image, instead what we do is we describe the image in the form of mathematical equations that you can use to describe the shapes in the picture. For example, everyone knows that a line going top to bottom, that's x equals y, right? That's one of the most simple algebraic equations that you can have on a 2D plane. But there are much more complex mathematical formulas. So you've seen things like quadratic formulas that have like a curve to it, or cubic functions that have double curves to it, or logarithmic lines that do this sort of thing. And all of those lines can have rotations applied to them. They can be enlarged. They can be translated to different parts of the screen. All of those are mathematical operations. And it just so happens that the computer is a fantastic calculator. And so if we can get a picture that has all of the lines described with math, then that means that we have an infinitely sized image.
What's the ETA for the workshop?
No.
No, I mean,
Oh, I don't know.
okay, cool.
So this is exactly the difference between raster and vector images. When you have a raster image, you have a fixed number of pixels. When you have a vector image, you have mathematics that give you infinite pixels.
It would be faster to do them one.
And what do you do with infinite pixels? Does anyone know?
So that's,
You can upscale it anytime.
Yep. And why would you want to do that?
It preserves quality no matter how you scale it.
right? And when would you want all of that quality? Can you give me an example of when that would be important?
Like if you want it to be like on something very large like a billboard.
Bingo. So when you have something that you're going on the side of the road and you see one of those big giant billboards and it looks like a photograph, some poor graphic designer somewhere took that photograph and drew lines over each and every single one of those edges to make it look crisp. All right? And those lines were done in Inkscape or a program that's like it. So that's what we're going to learn about now. Now the demonstration portion. Everyone open up Inkscape. If you don't have Inkscape installed, you can go to inkscape.org and you click on download now. It has a version for both Windows and Mac, and Linux for that matter. I would install the version for your operating system. If you're using Windows, they have an 64-bit version and you can use EXE. That's perfectly fine. And if you have a Macintosh and it's one of these newer Macs, like the M-style Macs, then you would use the ARM 64. And if you're not sure, just use the Intel version. Once you have it installed, you'll see something like this. So you're going to see this on the screen. And what I'd like you to do is I've shared some files with each and every person. The existing files here. At the top, you should see Browse for Other Files, and then click Open. And that should bring up a picker for you. And then you can navigate to where the file is that we're going to be editing, and open that file by double-clicking on it, or clicking on it and clicking Open down here at the bottom. We're going to be playing with, is it here? Oh, right, I had it back on the screen. So I've already opened this, so I'm just going to open up the Dirty Mechanics color logo. Make sure you guys have that open. Does everyone have that open? Anyone having trouble with that? You're good? Nice. Success, Ariana? No, not yet? Okay, while they're working on that, this might show very large on your screen. So if that happens here with you, you can go up to View and Zoom and go down to Zoom Drawing, which is number 4 here. And that should make it so that you can see everything on the screen very easily. Success. All right. So this is the interface for Inkscape. All of the work is going to be done on this screen. And just to kind of orient you around what the main things are here on the screen so you can know where to look for certain parts, I'm just going to walk you through them really quick. Along the left-hand side here is a list of your tools. This is the main place where you're going to be going to do all of your image manipulation. If you need something to change something on your image, it's likely going to be on the left-hand side. Along the top, my screen has one toolbar, but I believe that the default installation actually has 2 toolbars. And I think that the second toolbar that you'll see is over here on the right. And so of the 2 toolbars, the first one that has like a document with a star as the first icon, this is your main menu buttons, if you will. And a lot of these buttons here on that bar are the same exact buttons that you see across the top of the application. So it's the same thing that you find under File, Edit, View, Layer, Object, Path. A lot of these things you can find here as well. So if you prefer to use buttons, you can use buttons. If you prefer to use the menu, you can use the menu and get rid of this entirely. But if you hover over them, and Inkscape has a pretty good help system, so if you hover over any of these icons, you can see what it does. And you can see here's the print button. You can find print under File up here at the top. So you don't have to necessarily know what these things are. That being said, this other toolbar across the top here is a lot more important because this toolbar has all of the configuration details for the particular tool that you have selected. So every tool has a different set of features, and the way that you use those features will be by manipulating the items in this toolbar. Okay, and I'll get into what some of those things are in just a bit. So we have the toolbar, we have the secondary toolbar that you use to edit the tool settings. We have the main menu toolbar, if you will. I don't know that these are the actual names for them, but you kind of get the gist of what they have based on what the icons are. Along the bottom, you'll see that there's a bunch of colors. This is going to be your area that you go for general information about what the application is doing, as well as to pick the different colors that you're going to be working with. So you'll see there's a bunch of main colors here across the beginning. Then you have more primary colors, and then you can basically scroll through this list of colors by using these arrows here on the side. So you don't have to have just the colors that are listed, and you can change these colors out depending on what project it is that you're working on by selecting it here on the side. So if there's a specific motif that you're trying to achieve, you have a lot of flexibility here. Now something that you'll notice is that these colors here on the side didn't change. These colors here on the side are quick pick colors, and you can change those to be whatever it is if you have specific colors that you're working with extra. And then along the very, very bottom is a status bar. And the status bar is going to give you information about what the state of the application is. You can see that there is a fill and stroke. Everything that you're doing in a vector file is based on lines, and these will always indicate what the color of the line is that you're working with and what it could be if you change it. O is opacity. So you can see it's kind of disappearing. If I put this down to 10, you can see the background shadow is basically disappeared. If I put it back up to 100, it comes right back. Down here at the bottom, you'll see the layer that we have selected. We'll talk about layers in just a minute. Some settings about the layer, whether or not it's visible or whether it's locked. And then this is like an information area. So down here at the very, very bottom, there'll be some help information that lets you know what the tool that you have currently selected is, and maybe some quick hints as far as what you can do with it. And then down here at the right, you have your XY position, you have zoom, and you have rotate. So if you need to do things and you don't have zoom on your mouse, you can also go down here and you can change your zoom 150%. Or if you want to rotate it to be upside down, you can put 180 degrees and it will go upside down. You can do all of that down here. So you'll note that I did not talk about this area here on the right. Okay? So this whole area is called the properties drawer. And the properties drawer can have lots of different things. You can put different tabs here across the top. You can see that these tabs are selectable. And depending on what tab you have selected, the name of that tab becomes visible, so you can tell what you're looking at. This is the export tab. This is the text and font tab. And you'll note that there's keyboard shortcuts, so if you don't want to click on the tab title, you can quickly get to them by remembering what those are. This is the fill and stroke tab, and this is for layers and objects. There's other ones that you can open up. If you see this drop down here, you can see all the different things that you can play around with. I suggest playing around with that stuff when you have some free time. But the idea is that you can open and close these as you need to, depending on what it is that you're working on. A lot of these things are advanced. You might not necessarily have to work with them, but it's good to know that they're there. The main ones that are open are the things that you primarily will be focused on. And we're going to start with the Layers and Objects tab. The Layers and Objects tab, as I alluded to before, is the way that you organize the objects that you have in your project. So down here, you'll recall it says what layer it was that you're selected and working in. You can see that same layer is over here and it's highlighted. And you'll also see that this visibility and this lock icon, while it's not showing up here, if you hover over that layer, you'll see some extra icons. And these icons are configurable to change the properties of this particular layer. For example, clicking the lock will lock it, and you can see down here it also updates the lock for that layer. So if I change it here, it changes up here, and if I change it here, it changes down here. And likewise with the visibility. If I change the visibility, you can see that disappears from the picture, and it also updates over here on the side. So it's just a convenient way for you to access the property for that layer without having to open this drawer. Next to that, you'll have something that controls different ways of blending and modifying a particular layer. And right now it has opacity selected, but there's lots of ways that you can blend a layer into other layers. This is an advanced feature, but this is interesting because you can do things like cutting out parts of shapes in another shape, just putting one layer on top of another and telling it to, for example, difference. Okay? And difference will basically pull out one layer from all the layers underneath it. And that brings up another interesting point. Layers are additive. They're very much in the same way that like a layer cake has layers. The layer on the bottom is going to have layers on top of that, and the layer on the bottom supports all of the layers above it. That also means that any layer at the top will affect all the layers underneath it. So if you have something that this particular layer is doing as far as an effect is concerned, that will be shown on those layers underneath it, but not on the layers above it. Layers can also have sublayers. So if we expand this out, we can see that there are, I've labeled these with the names of what they represent. So if I were to select a particular layer, you can see that this is selecting the letters of this picture. And if I were to select 3932, you can see that the numbers at the bottom are what is selected. And that goes to show you that this layer is the same thing as these objects that are on the page. And so that's what these folders here are doing. They are organizing the individual pieces of this entire picture so that you can do things on all of the objects at the same time. You might want to do, for example, color changes, or you might want to add an outline to it, or you might want to copy it and put it someplace else entirely. Instead of using your tools and selecting each of these individual things one at a time, and then copying it and then putting it into a new place, you could do that right here from the Layers menu. Be able to copy it and then put it someplace new. So just know that the Layers tab and objects are where you organize the items that are in your file that you want to manipulate. We'll touch very briefly on fill and stroke. Anytime that you're working with an object and it is selected, the drawer will update here with the current state of that object. And I'll show you how that looks in just a minute. We haven't talked about the tools yet, but you'll see that when we play with the tools. Same thing with the text. If you're playing around with a text being written out, you can actually change the font, and the font will change here with all of the effects and everything that have been applied to that object. So you can do fancy things with text using this tab and the text tool. And then exporting. So when you're done with your project, this will let you control how big it needs to be, or what shape it needs to look like, or what format the file should be in, what resolution it needs to look like, any of those details, because SVG has infinite pixels. And that means that you can make any sort of file that you need.
So what tilts?
All right. So that's the main parts of the drawer. The main thing that you need to know about this is that it is going to update with whatever it is that you have selected, and you can use this to change that object.
It's one.